International Women's Day.
The day that can't drift by. This is the title of the first edition of a newsletter called Insight that Indra Nooyi just launched on LinkedIn earlier this week. It's an incredibly powerful article. I encourage you all to read it. And Indra ends it by saying, this is a conflicted world, but there are some things that are genuinely solvable. Helping women become more equal in society, making life easier for working families, creating jobs in communities where more people can thrive and rise. They are all on the list. Happy International Women's Day. Let's make it count. Well, Indra, we are not letting it drift by, and we are making it count because we're bringing in none other than you to share the lessons of your remarkable journey with us. And P.S., a quick plug for that newsletter. It was just launched this last Tuesday, and it already has close to 300,000 followers. Encourage you to join it. Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle Diamond. I have the privilege of running our LinkedIn Speaker Series, which is all about bringing in inspiring ideas and diverse, innovative thinkers to make you more productive and successful. Thrilled to welcome you here today, and I'm just so happy that you've made time to join us. In honor of Women's History Month, as we've mentioned, we have the honor today of hearing from Indra Nooyi. She was born in India, got her business degree in the US, and has had a remarkable career in business. She was the CEO at PepsiCo from 2006 to 2018, and that made her the first woman to hold a CEO position in a Fortune 50 company. She was best known for her performance with purpose approach, which was a strategy aimed at driving long-term growth while having a positive impact on society and the environment. She recently wrote a book called My Life in Full: Work, Family, and Our Future. And I just love that one of the things she says is that it's not just a memoir. It's a manual for the rest of us as we continue to work to build our careers, take care of young children, care for older parents, and strive to make a difference in society. A huge thank you to Indra for being such an inspiration to so many and for being a beacon of hope, something we all could use a little more of these days. We are also fortunate to have Dan Roth, our amazing LinkedIn editor-in-chief and incredible ally, here to speak with Indra today. They've had many interviews in the past together, and they've got such a great rapport that I'm personally just excited to see them reconnect. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Women at LinkedIn, Women in Technology, and Women in Product. Those are all internal groups at LinkedIn that have supported this event today. And so with that, I'd love to welcome to our virtual stage our very special guest, Indra Nooyi, and our host for the Speaker Series today, Dan Roth.
Hi, Dan.
Hello, Indra Nooyi. It is great to be back here with you today. How are you doing?
Very good. Feels like you and I just chat regularly. This is the best. Like a regular thing.
Absolutely. This is, for anyone who's just tuning in now, this is just every morning we start this way with Indra and I just chatting about what's on our schedules for the day. It is awesome to be sitting here with you today. As Rochelle mentioned, it is Women's History Month, and IWD, International Women's Day, just passed us by. Your newsletter, and I have to, by the way, correct those numbers. I think it was 300,000 the last time Rochelle looked at your newsletter. It's now 340,000 subscribers. So you are now larger than most like city newspapers. You have more subscribers than a lot than the papers that I grew up reading. So congratulations on that.
You know what? I got to credit LinkedIn, though, because I think you're a very, very powerful platform. You're a sensible platform that just talks about issues. You don't divide. So I think all credit goes to LinkedIn. And that's why I like being on LinkedIn. I like posting on LinkedIn. And I want to give you all my compliments for running such a good platform.
No, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Our goal is just to get out of the way and let you connect to the people who want to read and hear from you. And that's what today is about as well. So in your first edition of your newsletter, as Rochelle mentioned, you talk about the fact that you were giving the same speech for International Women's Day in 2022 that you could be giving the same speech in 2022 that you gave in 2007. And you talk about how opportunities for women just haven't changed that much. And let me read one quote. You say, why is dramatic change for women so maddeningly slow? So I would love to start there. Why is it so maddeningly slow?
And that to me is the big conundrum, because going back and reading that 2007 speech, on the one hand, I said, God, at least I've been consistent. I've been talking about these issues for over 2 decades. On the other hand, I actually felt a little sad, because in 2007, if I'd given the speech and all that I need to do is to change 1 or 2 statistics, which really don't make a difference because there's such glacial movement, what does that say for how society looks at women? And so here, Dan, I'm going to give you sort of the cup is 20% full and the cup is 80% not full kind of an answer. Changes are happening. The fact that we've gone from 0% CEOs who are women in 1994 to 42 today, after many, many years, is glacial progress, but it's progress. The fact that we're seeing many more women rise to senior positions in companies and government, I think is progress. It's not as fast as we'd like it to, but my hope is that it took a long time to get to some momentum, and maybe the time for momentum is here now and is going to pick up much more going forward. And in many ways, I think COVID has awakened everybody's consciousness to say, hey, wait a minute. It's tough not to be able to come to work. It's tough to have to balance all of the priorities at home and being the primary person who's a quarterback at home. And women represent such a fantastic talent pool at a point when we are short of talent. Why aren't we reaching out to this incredible talent pool called women and including them more in, matters of running the company? So I think it's actually awakened the consciousness of people in power to say, maybe we've been short-sighted in not reaching out and making sure that diverse talent, especially women, are truly included in our seats of power and contribute to furthering the economy. And hopefully COVID has been the pivot point.
When you talk about people in power reaching these decisions, you're someone who has been in power and is still in power, sits on major boards, gets invited to speak with government leaders. You are in the rooms where these kind of decisions happen. What are you hearing that frustrates you or that makes you say, like, how are you just coming to this conclusion now? Or why aren't you moving faster? What kind of pushback do you get when you give this message to other people in power and say, you're not moving fast enough?
I think it's the delta between talk and action. Everybody knows this is a big opportunity. Again, I often say that tapping women's talent represents the biggest emerging market opportunity in our country. So people are beginning to realize that this is a big opportunity, bringing women into the workforce, bringing diverse people who are highly talented into the workforce, promoting them, allowing them to be treated on par with everybody else represents a big opportunity. I think what happens, Dan, is that when you have to work with people who are different gender, backgrounds, ethnicity, it requires some adjustment. And people sometimes wonder if it's possible to make those adjustments, if it's comfortable to make those adjustments. I'm going to come back and say we have no choice but to make those adjustments if we want to use talent as a competitive advantage for our companies. In a world where we are short of great talent, we need all the talent available. So we should select from the entire pool, not from one portion of the pool, which is what we are doing today. So I think companies are beginning to recognize the issue and talking about it very vocally. I think the gap between the say versus do is still a little bit slow to bridge. And I think we're beginning to see the early steps, but I hope it's not because they feel it's a nice thing to do. Rather, it's the most important thing to do to further our company's competitive position.
You are a famously data facts-oriented leader. You had models for everything and made decisions based, using those models in how you were seeing the world and how you were evaluating how things were going. So are there numbers that you were looking for here? If you told all of us, look, I'm not going to give this same IWD speech again. Here's the 1 or 2 things I'm going to be tracking to see that there have been meaningful change.
Well, let me start off by saying Um, I've often said diversity and inclusion is a very complex subject. Diversity is numbers, inclusion is a mindset and behavior. So it has to start with the critical mass of numbers. So every company based on the industry should sit down and say, I want my employee pool to reflect the talent pool that's out there. So if you're an engineering company, don't say there are no women engineers, therefore I can't hire them, and therefore I'm going to remain 2% women engineers and everybody else men. If you look at the schools of engineering, they're ranging between 30 and 45% women in many, many engineering disciplines, including a fantastic institution like MIT. So I come back and say that company should be setting a goal to say, in my engineering talent, if I can't go from 10% women to 20 to 40 within the next 5 to 7 years, then I'm losing out on a great talent pool. So I think it's not a blanket number, Dan. It's industry by industry looking at the talent base out there and saying, how do you want the company's talent base to look like? First, for consumer companies, it's like you want your employee base to reflect the consumer base so that you make the right decisions for all consumers, every slice of consumer. So I think consumer companies, it's easier. But even consumer companies in manufacturing look at the manufacturing talent that's available and draw from the whole pool. So I think it's critically important we pause and say, these are not about blanket numbers in terms of representation. Now let's get to some other things. I want to see pay parity. Again, I'm not asking for it to be published in every newspaper because, sometimes data differs, and I'll give you an example. But every board of directors, every head of HR in companies should be looking at pay parity numbers very, very carefully and saying, for the same job, let's make sure men and women are paid the same. Absolutely. That's a non-negotiable. And finally, I think I'd love to see every company do very good org health surveys to understand what the mood is when it comes to dealing with diversity. Very, very important. And boards of directors should demand to see that once a year.
And what do you can you talk more about that health? What are you looking for there? What do you think they should be seeing? Is it that people are embracing diversity or that they are practicing it?
It's more asking diverse people, women, people of color, asking them, how do they feel the culture of the company is versus them? Do they feel supported? Do they feel developed? Do they feel there's an environment which makes them feel included and want to contribute to the company? So it's getting the point of view of the employee. Look, it doesn't matter if a company says we have great programs, but if the employee feels like they're not really included. So I think we have to get the perspective of, the consumer or the customer. In this case, happens to be the employees.
I was surprised that you didn't mention anything about retention. One of the points that you make frequently is that that you can increase the pipeline. You can bring people in and work to be a more diverse hirer and look beyond the normal pools of talent or figure out ways to develop talent. But what do you do when when people start having families, and women often bear the brunt of raising these families, of being the primary caretaker, and they drop out of the workforce, and the numbers are obviously
great question, Dan. I think it's important we look at it in 3 levels. So when I talked about making sure your employee pool reflects the talent pool available, nested within that is retention, because you have to start off asking, what numbers do I want to focus on? Why are these numbers shifting? And how do I make sure that I keep this thing moving forward as opposed to falling back? And retention falls within that. So the numbers should reflect at least, and I'm not saying put a lid on it, at least 35% women in, let's say, engineering levels. If your number is only 30 or 20 and not moving forward, or goes to 35 and drops back, you stop and say, why is that the case? Why have they dropped out of the workforce? And that'll give you analytics on they dropped out because the environment is not good. They don't feel supported, or they don't know how to balance work and family. Then you ask the question, what specifically about it? Is it about childcare, flexible working hours? So you've got to keep asking the whys and get to the basics, as opposed to blanket statements on, women don't stay when they have families, or young, family builders just leave because they can't deal with stress. I urge everybody to go into the details, go into the numbers, keep asking the why, and then solve for the why. Because at the end of the day, it's about holding on to the best and the brightest, developing them.
That's great. We have a lot of great commentary coming in from the chat.
Dan, one thing I want to say there, having children is also good for the country. So let's not look at having children as an extracurricular activity. It is the business of the country to keep growing the population.
Right. Ute, I'm sure I've just butchered that name. Sprenger says pay parity is a non-negotiable. Indra, there's a part in your book where you talk about getting not really thinking about pay. You weren't, as you were rising up the ranks, you didn't either know or you hadn't thought through how to make sure that you were getting paid more. At one point, you're always taking on more jobs. They keep giving you more and more responsibility. And at one point, they give you a indoor parking spot as a bump in your to show you thanks versus giving you more money, which I'm sure would be even better. What role do you think that employees have to insist on this pay parity and pay transparency and to vouch for themselves or stand up for themselves when it comes to pay versus it being a leader's role to always be out in front of it?
It would be a sad commentary if an employee has to go and say, how come I'm not paid as much as the others? I think that's a failure of the system. Why do we have head of HR? It's a head of human resources, not head of man resources, forgetting the HU. If you're really talking about human resources, you've got to worry about holding on to all your talent and making sure you treat them all equally. So human resources should be doing a, twice a year analysis on pay parity, making sure that when you give certain people promotions and pay increases, they're not treating another group, disproportionately differently. So I think HR should be looking at this regularly. On top of that, CEOs should be demanding a parity analysis once a year and making sure that they're a check and balance for HR and all of the leaders. Today there's lots of social media sites where people post their pay, but otherwise it's very hard for employees to really know whether somebody got special option grants or what the pay is. And the idea is not to create problems in a company. The idea is to just raise the awareness in companies to say, pay every person the same for the job done. I'm not asking you to take the pay down. If you're paying one person more, pay everybody the same. So all that we're saying is, let's make sure we have a good working environment where everybody feels valued. And I'm going to come back. It's a responsibility of the chief human resources head to make sure that this is taken care of and watched like a hawk all the time. At a period of the great resignation, we have to hold human resources people's feet to the fire.
We often talk about it as the great reshuffle, not necessarily the great resignation, because resignation is just part of the story and people are quitting, but they're also changing jobs and rethinking where they want to work and what roles they have within companies. So the change is even more profound than just, you don't pay me more, I'm going to leave. It's like, I'm not going to work with this manager. I'm not going to stay in this role. I'm going to go find something else. It's all kinds of upheaval for companies, even just beyond people leaving. And this is a great question that came in here, where someone says, how do you think your career would have progressed if you and your husband both had equally demanding, challenging and high level profile roles all along? And that's the question. I know in your book, you say your husband basically did have that, and you guys made a choice on where you were going to be investing your time, that really this was going to be about you taking the lead here and being the breadwinner and kind of leading from an economic sense for the family. So first of all, did I get that?
No, because my husband was a partner in a consulting firm and he was traveling all the time. And, as far as I'm concerned, either of us could have been the only person working and we would have been just fine. So this was not a question of him agreeing that I should be the breadwinner or whatever. It's just that at different times in our life, he did, not me. He said, we're going to move from Chicago to New York because I believe it's a better job opportunity for you. So he made the sacrifices, which, to me was just unbelievable. He put my career before his, I would say, in many cases. But he always had a very, very high intensity, travel intensive job. I think where we were benefited is because we lived in a multi-generational family. Our families always stepped in to help. And the ecosystem of people, even in PepsiCo, ended up being a huge support system, from secretaries to receptionists to even my boss. When I was president, CFO, Steve Reineman as my boss couldn't have been a bigger help than, anybody I know. He'd say, okay, you've got 2 kids in 2 different schools. One school needs you to come there for some meeting. I'll go pick up your other daughter from school, or I'm happy to go to the school for the parents' meeting because Raj is out of town. So here's the CEO of the company basically saying, I know what it takes to parent children. Let me help you out. So I had that sort of a support structure, Dan. And I have to tell you, I am a product of these kinds of people stepping out of the woodwork saying, let me help you manage all of these priorities. And let me help you, talk to your so-and-so if there's a problem at home, or let me help you take care of this issue with the contractors if there is one, like Gerhard Schulmeier did. So I'm a product of all of that mentoring and support structures, without which Raj and I could not have had a career, the high-powered careers we had, and our kids could not have turned out okay.
That's great. I now realize that I am failing as a manager because I have never once offered to help pick someone's kids up at school. I've got to start putting that into my playbook. I'm learning here from you. There's a great question that comes in from Chintzia, who I work with closely, who says, how should companies change the expectations they have for working moms, given the tremendous weight that the pandemic and working from home with children has put on them? I think we are all wondering this.
This is perhaps the question that's asked the most in recent times. And, during the pandemic, now I'm just going to talk about the office going worker, not the people in the front line, the essential worker, people who work in plants. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who come to work in offices. I think during the pandemic, we went into a hard shutdown, work from home. And coming out of the pandemic, we've got a whole range of models. There's a bunch of people who are saying, come back to work full time, because there's value to coming back to work. We want to build a corporate culture. Innovation thrives. The work product is better when you come to work. Productivity is better. I can see some value in that. There are others who say the choice is totally yours. Come in when you want. Don't come in when you don't want. Work from home. And the others who are saying 4-day work week, 3 days on, 2 days the next week, whatever it is. Everybody's experimenting with different models, and they should. Because in this period of uncertainty, nobody knows which model works, because we've never had this sort of tools available for flexible working, or we've never had to confront this issue of people really can't come back to work every day because there's so much uncertainty in schools and childcare. So now I'll come and talk about where I'm concerned and where I feel we ought to be careful. What we should not set up is 2 classes of citizens. One, a group that comes to work and are viewed positively, and one group that comes in flexibly or not at all and are viewed negatively. We should not do that. So we should set up rules for what works so that everybody gets treated equally. Second, I honestly believe when talking about future of work, perhaps we should put families in the center of future of work. I'm not suggesting companies turn soft and get very squishy about how difficult work is. All that I'm saying is, if parents want to leave at 3:30 to take their kids off the school bus, spend some time with them, helping them with homework, and then start to work again, give them the choice. Don't insist that people have FaceTime from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or whatever it is certain high-powered jobs do. Give people the choice to design their work days and perhaps their work schedules in concert with their spouses so that they can nurture families and contribute to the work, paid work. The issue is essential workers, Dan. That's what I worry about. Our teachers, our nurses, our doctors, our truck drivers, retail workers, they don't have a choice. They have to come to work every day. So we really have to think about support structures for them, pay scales for them, because we have to make sure they feel supported and not ignored at a time when everybody's thinking about the future of work.
So much to do. You were getting lots of virtual head nods in the chat. Charlene and Shalini both said takes a village to raise a kid. Steph says, thank you for highlighting the impact of those who have helped you. I often feel like we don't talk about that enough and how instrumental that is. And then Rochelle, or maybe it's Rachel, says, these personal stories resonate with me. Thank you for getting personal, Indra. So I want to get even more personal here and ask you a question about how you grew up. one of the big takeaways that I have from your book is how much you had to carve your own path. This was not where you ended up, was not at all where you started. And I'm not sure it was even close to being on your radar. As you look back on how you were raised and how you were supported as a kid growing through high school, are there things that you look back on now that you say, oh, these were the defining moments that made me who I am, or that enabled me to be the Indra Nooyi who is now running massive companies, sitting on incredible boards, writing best-selling books?
Best-selling books, book one.
One
and
book,
only
sorry,
just
right,
one.
best-selling book.
Never more than one. I think I won the lottery of life in that I was born into the right family. A family where the men said, you can do whatever you want, dream big, we're going to educate you, soar. So my father, my grandfather, and then my mother never stood in our way. Even though she struggled with the fact that we were breaking the norms of society, she allowed us to do whatever we wanted to do, as long as we lived within a framework for discipline, which was okay by us. So I won the lottery of life there. It's interesting. I have an older sister who's a year older than me. I think that helped a lot because we were so fiercely competitive in every way. Even though we were in different disciplines, we were so fiercely competitive. She made me a better person. She was smarter than me. She was better than me in every way, but she made me a better person. And then I was in an Irish Catholic convent in Madras run by Irish nuns. The fact that the Irish nuns somehow took an interest in my sister and me made a huge difference. Little things, Dan, they would push me to be in debating teams. And when they would take their evening walk and they would stop by our home because it was on the way to school, they would focus on diction. They would try to correct our pronunciation, make sure that we articulated words right. It's amazing in retrospect how much interest they took in our life. When I wanted to play in a rock band with a guitar that I found in school, the nuns encouraged us and came to the first performance sitting in the front row with their habits and their wimples. And you sit there going, you can't even imagine that this was happening in Madras in the 1960s. But at every stage, somebody came out of the woodwork and said, move on, just keep going. When you had to go out of town for a debating competition or for a big event in New Delhi, which I never thought my parents would give me permission to go, they said, go, this will be good for you. You're going with your teacher and other girls, just go. My vistas were open. So in every step of the way, I was plowing new ground, whether it was playing women's cricket, whether it was being in a rock band. And I was helped along by the most unexpected people and pulled along by mentors. So I had that push and pull, and somehow, one after the other, it took me from my comfort zone to an uncomfortable place, which then got comfortable, went to the next uncomfortable place. And people said, yeah, it's uncomfortable. We'll help you through it. So I think the big lesson from all this is that there are people who'll come along to push you if they see something in you. When you find them, hold on to them. Be nice to them. Respect them. Because you never know how your future might turn out if they were not in your life.
You talked so much earlier in our chat about the importance of paying teachers more, making sure that they're supported, and of allowing people to support their families and be there for their families. And just the lessons of how you've gotten here show the importance of both of those. Your family was around. They were supporting. Your teachers were involved in your life. They took an interest in you. They had the time to be able to do that and to push you. And it just keeps paying off. So it's not even, I'm just resonating on thinking about what you were saying earlier, because it's not just about supporting employees. It is about allowing them to give back so that the next generation can be great at what they do, what they want to do also.
I mean, I'm looking at teachers. The one thing we learned from the pandemic is they're not just teachers. They're teachers, they're childcare givers, they are, counselors, they're everything. We miss them a lot. They are incredible people. Dan, a couple of weeks ago, I had some minor knee surgery. I watched the nurses in the ambulatory center, and I could not believe how much work they do. And for each patient, they're cheerful. Even when they're tired, they're cheerful because each patient wants the nurse to be cheerful for them. And I'm just sitting there going, these are not nurses. They are superhuman beings because they were on their feet, smiling at everybody, reassuring people. I think these are the people who are the true heroes of our society, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the truck drivers who get caught in traffic for hours. So I think we've got it wrong. We've got to elevate some of these people into our national dialogue on how they should be supported and really cared for to allow us to have the quality of life we have.
So important. And we know from the data, the nurses in particular are ones who are the most burned out from the Great Reshuffle, from dealing with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Huge percent who are saying they are leaving the industry. This is not for them anymore. They are looking for jobs totally outside of nursing. So the numbers really back up. What you're saying is they got into it because they love it and they can't stay around because they're not supported or because they're just being worked too hard.
And they are marvelous. I mean, some of them are just fantastic.
How's your knee?
Getting better every day.
All right. All right. Before this interview, we asked some internal teams to submit some questions, the talent development team, the equity team, women at LinkedIn. I want to weave in some questions that came from these great groups. Mm-hmm. You've shared that there were many times where you were the one and only woman in a room, especially as you rose up the ranks. How did you get support on your journey, and what advice would you give to senior leaders as they look to provide similar career development opportunities, especially for those women who are the only ones in the room?
You know, I hope no woman is the only woman in the room anymore. And I would say being the only woman in the room is a rarity. That's the good news. So, there's always other women in the room and you can look to them for support. But I also think it's becoming okay for men to, reach out and support women. It started in my generation. I think more and more you're beginning to see men who are saying, hey, wait a minute, here's a real talent. Let me support her. Let me see how I can pull her up so that, she can contribute more to the company. So I'm actually optimistic that support from men in power for women is actually improving. It's also happening for other diverse candidates. It just needs to happen more. And women need to stay with it because people really want to help. Slowly, but people want to help. What would I advise women? It all starts with competence. Know exactly what you're good at. Become a lifelong student and keep widening your base of knowledge so you truly contribute to the company. That would be my plea. If you don't start with competence, you cannot win on anything else. People should respect you for your contributions to the company. So know what your core competence is and make sure that you just keep furthering your depth of knowledge in that area so that people say, hey, what's Indra a go-to person for? What is Dan a go-to person for? And make sure that your proposition is clear.
This ties into this a question that someone else asked, which is, women are generally perceived to be more risk averse than men. How have you been able to make really risky decisions? Can you recount an instance where you took a big risk in your career and how you arrived at that decision? I think a lot of people are thinking about even just beyond being competent. How do I be seen? How do I make sure I'm seen as someone who can take the company or take my org or take my team to the next level? And you have done that so many times in your career.
So let's think about it. Why do we not take risks? Let's talk about that. You don't take risks because you think you might make a mistake and you lose your job, or you don't take risks because you don't have the base of support, whatever it is. Ultimately, it comes down to I could get kicked out or, be demoted, something like that. In my case, I looked at decisions as what's the best for the company, not for me. What's the best for the future of the company? And second, my husband and I decided that we will live life on the lower of our two salaries. So if the other salary went away, it didn't matter. We would live life in a modest way. We didn't have to live larger than life. And as I said, my husband had a wonderful career. And so we, lived our life, modestly for a long, 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 long time. And even now, I would say relatively modestly. And so it helped to think that way because it gave you confidence at the office that you could be courageous, that you could, have the courage to walk away if you felt disrespected or if you felt that you were not contributing to the company. You've got to have that backstop. And I had the backstop. If you don't have the backstop and you need that job desperately, it puts a whole different lens on how you hold on to the job. And then, in fact, it actually makes you question every decision and makes you want to rethink how courageous you can be. When that happens, you do two things. One, you fall back on your competence. Second, make sure you sort of take your decisions for a small road trip in a very trusted group to make sure that you've really kicked the tires, especially with people who know how to push back on you. Get their feedback, listen to it very carefully, and modify what you have to do to make sure that it's acceptable to the organization. I did that too, but I took a little bit more risks than perhaps anybody expected me to. Performance with purpose was a risk, but I decided to do it.
Yeah, I was actually just going to go there. First of all, I love the idea of a decision road trip. I'm definitely going to start using that. Performance with purpose was you were taking Pepsi into a very different direction. We're insisting that Pepsi take itself into a different direction, thinking about environmentalism, about the impact that the company has on the environment, and about being healthy, how you make sure that Pepsi is promoting a healthy lifestyle. Pepsi is a company that I think was not thought of, and still probably is not really thought of as a place for maintaining your health. It is about delicious food and great drinks and satiating your needs right now. And in your book, you talk a little bit about this, is you really had to pull people in this direction. I think you got a lot of people who were nodding their heads and saying, oh yeah, Indra, we're on board, but you knew they weren't really on board. So can you talk about two things? One is how you decided to make that risky, what I think a lot of us would look at as risky, because you're kind of asking the company to do something that it has not done before. So how do you decide that you were going to push into this risky area? And then how do you get people to buy into it?
Great question, Dan. And I'd say, if I'd frame this as, I just want to change the company, people would say, what for? Why are you suggesting we should change the company? This is not something that has to be changed on your whim, which is correct. I framed it outside in. I said, let me tell you the big megatrends that are coming at us. And let's agree on these megatrends. If we agree on the megatrends, then let's work backwards and say, what do we need to change in the company to make sure that we can be successful in light of these megatrends? So step one was working with the core team of leaders in PepsiCo to identify those megatrends, and then working future back to say, what changes do we need to make from where we are today in PepsiCo to remain successful in light of these megatrends? For example, the shift to health and wellness, the shift to more environmental sensitivities, which could result in you being shut down in certain countries or being imposed taxes on. So when you look at all of these trends, you know that something fundamental has to change to future-proof the company or to de-risk it. You can look at one of two ways. And performance with purpose was an encapsulation of what we needed to do in language that engaged people's head, heart, and hands. The heart was very important. That's why the word purpose was important. And that's why we said financial performance is always paramount. PepsiCo is a high-performing company, and we're always going to remain that. But we're going to do that while shifting our portfolio to have a balance between fun for you, better for you, and good for you products, focusing on the environment and creating an environment where people can bring their whole selves to work. Now, there were people who said, yeah, we need to change, but do we need to change? Question is, everybody recognized the megatrends, but transforming a successful company is incredibly difficult. When you have a burning platform, it's very easy, but transforming a successful company is very difficult. That's where the rub was, because I had to convince people that if we were to make the transformation happen, we would remain successful well into the future, as opposed to have to go through a boom splat kind of a cycle. And I think that's what stood us in good stead.
Indra, is that something that anyone can do, or is that identifying megatrends and getting people to buy in on challenging how they have done business or thinking about doing things differently, even if it's not in their best interest for today? You know, they're looking at what are the KPIs they need to hit, and you are suddenly asking them to think 3 years into the future and be more focused on that. At the CEO level, I totally get how you pull that off. Is there something for us who are not at that level, who are just trying to lead teams or influence peers to be paying attention to these trends that you're seeing? How do you get people to buy in there? Or is it really something that has to start at the top?
I think megatrend work has to be done at different levels. Me as a CEO, I was doing for PepsiCo as a whole, but if you look at our snack business versus our beverage business, they should be looking at it too. So you have to decide at what levels it should be done. But I will tell you one thing. If you have businesses which can transform quickly, many knowledge businesses can transform quickly at a low cost, then you can, have the trend come upon you and make the change. But when you have to change product formulations, when you have to innovate new platforms, when you have to set up new manufacturing methods, you have to think long term. When you need technological breakthroughs to lower water usage or put more recycled plastic in your products, it requires thinking long term and making the appropriate investments. So your time frame for thinking about megatrends and how quickly you have to adapt is a function of what kind of a business you're running. Many software companies, when they see a trend, can make a change in 6 months. Very different than a manufacturing company. So I think you've got to think about the industry, the time frame it takes to make changes, and then, at what levels you want to do the megatrend work. But you have to do it. You just have to do it.
Great. And our time is almost up here. I want to get back to where we started this conversation and also tied in where you just left things off, which is bringing change within companies. One of the changes that you also brought at Pepsi and that you have been bringing to in your speaking and as you were serving on boards, et cetera, is the idea of changing how companies think about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. A question came in from the team and says, was there a personal aha moment for you when you realize your work can influence institutional or systemic change?
When I was doing Performance with Purpose, which was so ahead of its time, I wasn't doing it to change anybody else's thinking except PepsiCo's. I was just very narrowly focused. And of course, I faced a lot of criticism, but I just kept on because I looked at the mega trends, I looked at what we needed to do, and I didn't know any other way to run the company. And the great news is my board was solidly behind me. So this journey was going on, and now people look at it and go, oh my God, she was prescient, and then let us give her a couple of awards for doing that. It feels good to get those awards, I will tell you. On the other hand, when I was going through it, was very difficult. I think we're at a point now where we have to think about support for young family builders, especially women, in profound ways. And so thinking about change on a societal basis is a daunting task. But the great news is there are so many extraordinary people working on this already. So many extraordinary organizations who have researched the programs, coded. All that I want to do is to be able to provide some resources, funding, whatever it takes to bring them together to say, let's bring all the work together and let's figure out how to go to the right people to start to implement change as opposed to studying change, whether it comes to flexible work hours or paid leave or childcare support for young family builders. Let's talk about how to help talent that could stay in paid work as opposed to leaving because they have other pain points in their life. So that's the moonshot I'm focused on, Dan. And I think that people who've had the power of the platform when they were working in companies should not drop that and make it a force for good once they've retired. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Amazing. Well, I would encourage everyone to go and subscribe to your newsletter so you can be part of Indra's platform. Indra, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much. I want to leave with one last comment that came in the chat from Venus Smith, who said, this has been a really great conversation. I hope business leaders are taking note. So exactly what you're saying. Everyone has a platform. People should be out there talking, speaking the truth, explaining how the world needs to change or how they are trying to make that change. Indra, you are doing that every day and every week on LinkedIn through your newsletter. So thank you so much for joining us here, spending so much time. Your time is valuable. Really appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you. And thank you for running such a wonderful platform, Dan. It's a real pleasure.
All right. Indra joined us today for part of our LinkedIn Live speaker series. Thank you all for tuning in. You all have very busy days. There are other things you could be doing. Choosing to stop and spend some time listening to Indra Nooyi is really special. And thank you for being so active in the chat and in the questions ahead of time so that we can make sure that your thoughts and concerns and ideas get heard and answered from Indra Nooyi. So if you can give a big virtual round of applause to the entire team that put this together, particularly Rochelle Diamond, who runs these phenomenal speaker series, I would appreciate that. You can leave that in the chat. And we will see you all next time on LinkedIn.